I was just a boy in the 1960s. Everything I had known during that time period was riots, assassination, the Vietnam War, environmental degradation. In my short life, I really thought that the world was a place that didn't inspire much happiness or hope. At that point, nobody was thinking of the Great Lakes as a source of food or recreation. If you were to even walk the beach, there were the windrows of dead alewives. The water pollution was bad. There was still a lot of runoff coming from agricultural fields. All those were very hard on our native species. We all have the curiosity about what these organisms are doing. We see the fillets in grocery stores, we go fishing and we get a few, but there's a whole dynamic that's playing out behind the scenes there that eludes us. We have to turn to a lot of different methodologies and techniques to try to understand what's taking place, try to understand what's happening beneath the water.
Here in Michigan, fishing is a year-round sport. All along the shores of Lake Huron, there's always the chance that the next cast will bring a battle with a tackle buster supreme. It is here that many a youngster gets his first glorious taste of this all-American sport.
This fishery right here is very important to people around here and to the communities. You have Linwood, you have Bay City, Seaboing, Quantico, Caseville, Pinconning, Standish, Au Gres. They all really count on this fishery. This is a year-round fishery that brings millions of tourism dollars to this part of the state. It's the lifeblood of this community, is this walleye fishery. I started fishing with my father when I was a young kid. I just liked to get outdoors for relaxation, to get table fare. It's a nice little fish. Little walleye. Those are the best eaters right there. I've fished the professional circuit for 20 years. I've fished walleye tournaments from New York to Montana and Canada to Arkansas and everywhere in between. You know, I've often said that this fishery right here is, if not the best in the entire country. It's a close second. And it didn't used to be that way at all. It was almost like the Dead Sea out here.
Restoring a spawning reef is really all about habitat restoration. And I think to understand that, you really have to go back in time a little bit to understand what happened to the fish community in Saginaw Bay. It began really with the logging era, when that released a lot of sediment into the watershed and out into the bay.
They say that the white pine that came out of the Saginaw Bay watershed and was floated down the Saginaw River actually built Chicago. So it was a major source of lumber in the 1800s. And then after the lumbering industry, obviously, came the agricultural industry, which also had significant impacts on the resource.
We're actually kind of the northern rust belt of America's old industrial age. But we've had automotive industries in here, shipbuilding industry. We've produced a lot of big products, industrial products here, but that's taken its toll on the water resource, the Saginaw River and the Saginaw Bay in particular. So we've had some pretty significant environmental contamination.
And what we saw in the second half of the 20th century was a lot of problems facing our fish populations. And so understandably, these fish populations collapsed. Walleye were virtually extirpated at some points in the 1940s and 50s and 60s. It wasn't really till the environmental movement of the 1960s that people had become fed up with burning rivers and contaminated resources. The public was demanding, expecting more environmental protection. Agencies like the EPA were invented. We had clean water quality legislation, and that was really the turnaround point. And once people began to recreate in the Great Lakes and go out and fish, that raised their expectations. Then they wanted restoration of native species. Often that was through stocking. And now we're kind of on to the next generation of that.
It took us 100 or 150 years to make those impacts, and so we're spending time right now cleaning those up. The sedimentation itself, just the simple fact that dirt is leaving the land and entering the water, is Saginaw Bay's largest pollutant, and really that's what's covered our reefs, which historically have been very productive sites for fish spawning. What we're doing is we're going to go out and build a reef in Saginaw Bay, and it's not like the Great Barrier Reef. It's not like the reefs in the oceans. These reefs, they're glacial till, they're small rock formations.
We're going to take rocks from the shore, from a location along the Saginaw River, transport those rocks out into the bay, and then we're going to pile those rocks up in a rectangular formation, a couple acres in size. The goal is to have a lot of spaces in those rocks where fish can lay their eggs.
Right now, there are a lot of spawning opportunities in the Saginaw River system. This provides an opportunity for fish to spawn out in the bay itself and rebuilds these reefs that were there in the 1700s, the 1800s, but were silted over. So it's really an incredibly important restoration project for Saginaw Bay.
By gosh, it's been a dream of mine to get this reef put out there. It's been a dream for the county, the localities around here, everybody. This is a big deal.
I think it's always really satisfying to see on-the-ground implementation. We spend a lot of time planning, a lot of time spent raising money to make projects like this happen. Hours and hours and hours of meetings that have taken place to get us to this stage, but this was something that was always the end goal, to get us to the point of construction. I think now, after all of this time, we're about to see something pretty spectacular out on Saginaw Bay. It's a little more sophisticated than just going out and dumping the rock in the bay. There's a grid pattern that's been developed that the contractor has to meet. It's not a lot different than an architect putting together the plans for a building and then handing those plans off to the builder.
We're looking for a specific pattern of rocks and a certain setup of rocks. Using GPS and the pusher out there, they'll be able to stay in one spot and move the rock and drop it exactly where it needs to go.
When it's completed, about 27,000 tons of rock are going to end up out in Saginaw Bay. It's going to take about 2 to 2.5 weeks. The construction crew is going to work 24 hours a day. So it's a big commitment by everybody involved to go out there and really get the project done in a hurry.
We'll have these rocks in for the fall spawning of the whitefish. So we're going to get a chance to see the reef, how it works for whitefish right away. Then come spring, we'll have the walleyes in to see what happens. What do you think? All right. Finally.
Morning.
The post-construction evaluation kicked off within just a matter of days of the actual construction completion. The first step was really just to get out there and look at it with our remotely operated vehicles and to map it out using side-scanning sonar technology. The closer you get, the better, as long as we're not right on it.
Yeah, 35 feet off of this one. You know, I spotted it here, I spotted it there, so we'll see how she sits.
All right, we're ready to do it.
You're free. There you go. Yep, you're going kind of straight back now.
Visibility is really poor. When I have been able to see something, I haven't really seen the reef. It looked like sand bottom. Oh, right there it is. Yeah, that's limestone. Yeah. We're there. Look at that. I'll be darned.
Oh yeah, look at there.
The biological response is really ultimately what we're most interested in. This is really about providing spawning habitat, so the post-construction assessment will ultimately include a lot of netting, looking for spawning fishes, egg predators, and the eggs themselves. You can see those interstitial spaces where the eggs will eventually settle out once fish are spawning on this in the fall and in the spring. Oh, there's a fish. It was big too. Oh, another fish. They're all over it. It's easy to imagine that fish are always abundant and they're always there, but that's not always the case. Fish populations, these fish communities are ever changing, and there's always potential for new invasions, new reactions, changes to climate. We have to be on top of that. We have to be in step with the changes that are taking place so that we can understand in real time what's happening and maybe even make predictions and forecasts about what's going to play out.
The Great Lakes are something that are really spectacular from a global perspective. The lakes are beautiful and great to look at, but if you don't have a habitat that fish can go and spawn and hide and live, you know, how great are the Great Lakes? What we're doing here is really trying to build that habitat and really ensure that generations of fish have a place to spawn and to live. It's our responsibility to take care of Saginaw Bay, to take care of these lakes. I think this project is one of those legacy projects for Saginaw Bay.
This has been 100 years in the making. This is like the highlight, the pinnacle of our restoration efforts. This is about healing a wound not just in the Saginaw Bay, but the Greater Lake Huron and the Great Lakes system. We created this wound. It's our obligation to help heal it and to remedy that.